How's it going, everyone? In this video, we're going to discuss why dividing by 0 cannot be done, or more specifically, why a calculator will give you the answer error or undefined, because usually dividing by 0 creates a logical contradiction. So let's get into it. And what we'll do is we will divide by almost 0. We'll take the number 1, although you could do this exercise with any number, and divide it by something very small, like 1. And the answer we get is 1. Now what if we divide by something even closer to 0, like 1 divided by 0.1? Well, then we get 10. Let's divide by something even closer to 0, 1 divided by 0.01. That gives us 100. Let's divide by something even closer to 0, 1 divided by 0.001. That gives us 1,000. And you see that as we get closer and closer to 0 in the denominator, our answer gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And we could do this forever. So what's the limit of this process? Well, if we have 1 divided by x, the limit of that as x approaches 0 is infinity. It will just get bigger forever. So loosely speaking, you could conclude that 1 divided by 0, and really not just 1, but any number, let's call it a, divided by 0, loosely speaking, equals infinity. That's not a strictly correct way of formulating it. The strictly correct way of formulating it would be what's in the box here. The limit, as you divide by a number that gets closer and closer to 0, that limit is equal to infinity. Now, everywhere here, we are dividing by a positive number. What happens if we divide by a negative number? Because in this situation here, well, why doesn't the calculator just say infinity? Why does it say error? Well, we're about to see why. Let's say we have 1 divided by negative 1. Well, that's negative 1. 1 divided by negative 0.1. So we're dividing by something that's getting closer and closer to 0, but from the negative direction. Well, that gives us negative 10. 1 divided by negative 0.01. Negative 100. 1 divided by negative 0.001. That's negative 1,000. So we see that as we get closer and closer to 0 from the negative direction, the number gets smaller and smaller and smaller. It approaches negative infinity. So if we have 1 divided by x, the limit of that as x approaches negative 0, that's negative infinity. So if we're dividing by something that's getting closer and closer to positive 0, we're getting closer and closer to infinity. But if we're dividing by something that gets closer and closer to negative 0, we're getting closer and closer to negative infinity. So where are we actually getting to if we're dividing by 0? The thing is, negative 0 equals positive 0. More commonly referred to as 0. Well, see, subtracting 0 and adding 0 describes the same phenomena, which is adding or subtracting nothing. So negative 0 equals positive 0. Well then, if they're equal to one another, then how is it that dividing by 1 gives us a different answer than dividing by the other? Right? Because 1 is equal to negative infinity and the other is equal to positive infinity? Or to put it in a less formal way, how come something divided by negative 0 approaches one answer, something divided by positive 0 approaches a different answer, even though negative 0 equals positive 0? That is a logical contradiction, and that's why an answer to dividing by 0 cannot be defined, because dividing by 0, depending on what direction you look at it from, the positive direction or the negative direction, gives you a different answer, positive infinity or negative infinity. Now, that said, there are situations where you can divide by 0. That's regularly encountered in calculus. Now, I won't get into calculus here, but I will give you a thought experiment which shows you where maybe this actually does not create a contradiction. Consider two people walking forever in opposite directions. So one moves this way forever in the direction of positive infinity, and the other moves in the opposite direction forever in the direction of negative infinity. See, practically speaking, what does infinity mean? It could mean forever, or it could mean so large that if it were any larger, we don't really care that it's any larger. That's how big it is. In this case, we mean just walking forever in a certain direction. Well, will these people meet? Yes, they will. In fact, if they keep on walking forever time-wise, they will meet many, many times. So in this particular situation, you could conclude that positive infinity equals negative infinity, because going forever in either one of those directions will get you to the same place. And so in this situation, there is no logical fallacy, because dividing by 0 from the positive direction or the negative direction will give you positive or negative infinity, which is actually the same thing. So dividing by 0 will give you the same answer, whether it's a positive or negative 0. So this thought experiment shows you that, well, there are situations where dividing by 0 could be okay. So I hope you enjoyed that, found it interesting and informative, and until next time.